Hey, welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Today we're going to do some corrective pruning on our muscadine vines. Come along. My muscadine vineyard is a micro vineyard. That means it's smaller. The spacing is about 2 feet shorter on each side of the vines than normally you would do. But I've been able to get some heavy and really productive harvests over the last couple of years. I planted these in 2017, so they're going into their 6th year of growing. But I have to correct some pruning mistakes that I made, and I want to try to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it this way. You don't have to keep your fruiting spurs really short, but I want my fruit to be close to head level. I want it not drooping down on the ground, so I've got to do some correction. I want to take you along today. Well, we have to take these back a little bit more than I'd like to, because in past years I was a little bit timid on my cuts and I left too many buds on here. Ideally on these fruiting spurs you want to leave one fruiting bud, and I was a little timid, thinking one was not enough and would leave 2 or 3, and so I get these fruiting spurs that are kind of gnarly. And I'm having to come in and do some correction and really cut them back, which will affect our fruit production this year negatively. But that's the way it goes. You have to do some corrective pruning every now and then. Okay, right here, this one here. I cut it here, it put off this one, but it's putting off a new little one here closer to the main vine. I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to cut it right there so that bud, that little bud right there, that's going to be a new vine. And all of this old growth right here from the last couple of years that's getting ringed by this tendril that I can't get off, I'm going to take that out. There we go. We've taken that fruiting spur down to this new bud right here. We're correcting. This bud right here is far too close to anything, so it goes away. Take off your tendrils. Wow, that wind. Here's a good one. Take the downward off and leave that one bud there. This going up here, we could cut it back to right there and let that bud be our new vine. But I see a bud coming out here closer in, so I can take that out, take that out, take that out, and take that fruiting branch out. That little bud's going to be our new vine, and it's facing upwards, which is what we want. Unfortunately, this one's facing downwards, but I've got a bud facing upward, so that's going to be our fruiting bud right there. Yeah, this is a real mess. Okay, right in here at the crown where our vine splits, goes down the wire, we have a certifiable mess. I've left this way too dense, and I need to take out some of these fruiting spurs. I need to start clearing some area. This one right here, it's just too big. So we're going to take that whole thing off. That's so thick I might need to get the saw. There we go. That's a lot of fruit coming off right there. But we're having to correct for what we did wrong. So you can see in my previous years I've made various cuts in here that have forced out these fruiting spurs, and they're really thick and built up now. They're growing into each other, they're ringing each other out. I need to deal with this. Well, ideally we want our buds that are going to grow into new vines to point upward. This is just too much wood right in here. I don't know if we're going to get any. I don't see any buds here on this hardwood. Most of the buds you'll see are on last year's growth. I'm going to cut right there because there's a potential for a bud to come off right there. But down in here, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to take this out. Oh, if I can get there. Yeah, that's a shame. This is an old gnarly veteran. There's some new growth with a bud on it. Alright, so this fruiting spur will shoot up a bud that way. Let's clean this guy. We don't need these downward facing vines. We want all our fruit to try to go upward. What do I see here? I've got a tender little bud right there, so I'm going to take out some of this older wood. Come on off of there, you. I really don't need this pole anymore. This was the pole that I raised these things up from the ground on. Alright, so let's trim off all this mess in here. Try to get some space between these fruiting spurs. I got fruit. I had fruit coming out of the trunk last year. Look at that. Crazy. Well, that's sad to see, but it had to happen. Make sure that your label is not ringing your plant. I think we'll be okay this year. Alright, let's move on. Too many fruiting spurs. You're supposed to give about a hand's width between each of your fruiting spurs. And let's get these in frame. I see here I've got a fruiting spur, and a fruiting spur pointed down. I've got one back here going that way. You're supposed to be about a hand's width between each of them. These are getting a little hairy. I have some new buds right on this old growth, so I'm going to make this my new fruiting spur, and I'm going to take the rest of it off. That will be my new fruiting spur. Cut these little things here. Now, see, I don't see any buds on this one. That's the problem. There's all kinds of tendrils all wrapped around in here. Let me see if I can pull those off. Maybe we can force a bud out right in here. I'm going to cut that off. Cut that tendril. I think we can force a bud right here. We will see. Which means I'm taking this off. And never fear, if it doesn't work out, these trees, these vines will force out growth from the trunks and from branches. They want to survive, they want to live, they'll do what they need to do. You just might get lower fruit production this year. And you know, that's okay. So the way I'm handling this is I'm just basically cutting everything back to be about, all my fruiting spurs to be about 2 or 3 inches long. And I want to try to keep them close to the main lateral vine as possible each year. So every 4 or 5 years I anticipate I'm going to have to come through and do some serious cutting back and hope that some buds can form out of that hard wood, out of that barky wood. Because there are nodes on the bark. I'm guessing that they can push forth new growth. I see it sometimes along the trunk. But yeah, this corrective measure means we probably won't get as much fruit this year. But that's okay, you know, that's how it happens. That's how it works. What you're seeing here are vines that have already been cleaned up a bit. You know, the big stuff has been chopped away just kind of at random. I've got a big pile of brush over there. Now we're doing our finer tuning. Alright, the wind's very bad. I hope you can hear me. Here's our problem. When you leave too many buds on a fruiting spur, when you're pruning, especially when the plant's young, there were 1, 2 of them on here. I should have left 1, and then this would have this thick part would have stopped here, and then I would have the next year's growth coming out down here. But because I was timid and I left 2 buds, there's probably actually more than 2. This is long now, and way out here is the next year's wood, and well, it's all woody and hard and doesn't have any tender buds on it. My tender buds are way out here on last year's growth. And if I was going to prune this like I normally would, I'd come on my new wood and I'd find a bud that's pointing in the right direction, the first bud along this growth, and I'd trim right above it, and that's where my new vine would come out. The problem is, now we've got all this long growth that we don't need, and it's going in the wrong direction. I've already taken this one out, so I'm going to have to leave some on here. So I'm going to take these out, and I'm going to let this little bud here, I think there's a bud there, I'm going to let that be our spur. It's aiming this way. We can kind of correct it back this direction. Alright, so we have a spur going off that way that you can't see. If I turn around, you can see it. And it's looking alright, but it's pointing downward. And I don't see many fresh buds, except there's one right there by my finger, right there, and it's aiming up. So that will be our fruit spur for this particular area right here. Everything else comes off. This one here, which is a little close, only 2 fingers width, I don't see any good ones except right there, so everything else comes off. I know it looks brutal, and it is, but the plant doesn't mind. There's a good bud right there. Take this off. Yeah, this one's aiming downward, but it's got some fresh wood back here with a couple of buds on it, so we're going to trim that off, and we're going to let this be our new fruiting spur, and I'm going to take the downward facing part of it. I'm going to take it away. See, whenever you trim something off a muscadine, you also have to trim all the tendrils grabbing on. Alright, so that gives us the fruiting spur there. Here's one here with some fresh growth right there. One bud. Cut everything else out. That one bud right there, that'll grow for us. Another hand space. See, here's a good example. Let me show you. Let me get you in here. Okay, so here's a good example of a dilemma. We've got all this mess. Let's just kind of clear out some of this so we can see what's going on here. All right, I have old wood here. This wood right here is older, and there are no buds along this wood. Let me get this tendril off there so it doesn't stay ringed. This was last year's new growth, so there's a bud that can come out there. I'm going to trim that, but everything else on this old wood I'm cutting back. This old wood will beef up and support this one. Hopefully it'll go up like it looks like it's heading. There's a tiny little bud there. Okay, check this one out. You can see when they grow down, they tend to try to correct. This is last year's growth and it's heading upward. I like that growth. So I'm going to take off the growth that's pointing downward here, and I'm going to let this one, that bud, there's a bud right there, aiming upward. This is too close to this, so we're going to remove this spur altogether. I want to give you a play-by-play on how this particular spur we're working on grew over the years. Right here, the blue represents the growth we had in 2019. We pruned that one back to a single bud, and that single bud produced the 2020 growth that's represented there by the orange. We pruned that back to a single bud, which gave us the new growth that we experienced last year, represented by this green. And we're going to pick one single bud and make our cut right there. That's how we keep these things pruned. This is some of the mess that we trimmed off of our muscadines. That's a lot of wood, and I'm going to use this to chip up in my little chipper shredder and add to the compost pile or use it as mulch. That's just a little bit of what we trimmed up. I've already processed some of it. Yeah. Well, there we go. Our vines are now in good shape. You can see that when you prune a muscadine, they put out water. They kind of weep a little bit. So you can see right in here there's some water. But yeah, these ought to come out pretty soon. Within a month, we should start seeing some leafy growth, and we should expect a good harvest in the summer from some of the plants here, from some of the trims we've done. Some of these fruiting spurs are in good shape. Others we had to prune back pretty heavily, and I'm not so sure if those are going to produce fruit this year. And I accidentally did cut my main vine here. I was growing a new main vine because I accidentally cut it back last year. Well, now I've accidentally cut it back this year, and I'm missing about 2 feet. But it will make this distance up. In fact, every year these vines grow into each other quite a bit. Look at this trunk. This is going into year 6, and the trunks are nice and barky and thick. Yeah. I've been real pleased with these muscadines. They have done well for me, and I'm really glad that those years ago I decided to put in this little micro vineyard. Awesome. Real satisfying. Real satisfying to grow your own perennial fruit. Now I do have a playlist on growing muscadines, all the way from when we planted this to how to prune the first year and how to prune normal years. And then now I'm going to add this video to that playlist on how to do corrective pruning. So go check that playlist out if you're interested in muscadine grapes. They're a wonderful, wonderful fruit. Okay, so what we've done is we've pruned up our muscadines. We've done a lot of corrective pruning, and yeah, we're going to see if that really hampers our fruit production this year. And well, take it down to, when you're doing your pruning, take that cut all the way down and just leave one bud behind. I think it's better. I've learned my lesson, learned it the hard way, and now our corrective pruning should be on the way to recover these vines, keep them nice and compact, and keep all these fruiting spurs, you know, in close to the lateral vine. That's what we want, so our fruit doesn't hang all the way down to the ground. It's about time to tighten my wires as well. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. But there we go. That's what we did. We took down our fruiting spurs to be real short, and we made some cuts that we normally wouldn't make, but we're going to see if it works. Thanks for joining me on Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.